Hello and welcome to episode 51 of the Rockies Now podcast. We are a Colorado Rockies podcast. Whether you're a Rockies fan or just a baseball person, you can follow us at Rockies Now on all of your favorite social media platforms: Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Thanks for joining with us today. I'm your host, Steven. Right there is co host Tom. Tom, how are you doing?
Pretty good. I'm excited because baseball is back. Football season's in the rearview mirror. Hearing the pop of a glove or the crack of a bat on a baseball is music
Mhm.
to my ears.
Yeah. And I was just telling Tom, for those who are watching, I am enjoying my Dr. Pepper from In N Out for the first time. So that's pretty nice. But yeah, man, baseball's back, like you said. Um, for me, it's kind of like back to normalcy for me because again, the off season is so weird with, and plus this off season kind of sucked with, with basically zero. I felt like zero action because of all the free agents that are still out there. Bellinger's still out there, Snell's still out there, and we're not going to talk about free agency tonight, but it's at least nice that we have spring training back to celebrate. And I think the first game is like in 6 days, so that's pretty cool. Um, yeah, baseball's back, and of course, last week we had our 50th podcast, and we only have about 50 more until we get 100. So that will probably be later in the season. But yeah, I mean, really exciting. That I mean, in the opening days, I think 40 days away, right? Something like that. 40, yeah,
Yep.
40
Yep.
days.
4 days.
So yeah, that's pretty cool. So I believe Tom. Last week I did my joke, and I think it's Tom's turn to give me a joke. So Tom, what do you have for me?
Okay. Well, those of you who are fans of Chuck Norris jokes like myself, here's a good one for you. There are no steroids in baseball. Only players Chuck Norris has breathed on. So there's a good little tidbit for everybody out there who enjoys a good Chuck Norris joke.
uh, that that's a good one.
Yeah, it's kind of cheesy, corny, but hey, Chuck Norris jokes are like that. It's one of my favorite pieces of humor. So
Ah,
for all you out there
comedy,
looking for a laugh, hopefully that put a smile on everyone's face. It still puts what a good smirk on my.
comedy.
It still puts a good smirk on my face if you're watching this live cast.
Yeah, man, it's yeah. Again, we'll do that every week to kind of cheer you guys up. I got a kick out of that one.
Mhm.
So today we're going to be talking about the outfielders, and I'm excited for tonight because um, the Rockies, they have a bunch of really good outfield prospects coming up, and we're going to talk about them
Mhm.
in a second. But
Mhm.
let's talk about some of the guys that we think that will be starting outfielders on opening day.
Mhm.
Starting out in left field, I think it's guaranteed that Nolan Jones is going to be the starting left fielder for the Rockies. I mean, we saw what Nolan Jones did last year in the outfield. I mean, multiple throws, or like, I mean, look at the Statcast numbers; they're insane. 100 miles per hour. I mean, he gunned people down, and people still have yet to learn not to run on Nolan Jones um, with his arm. And really, when he was traded over here, we didn't really know about his defense. We thought, he might be an average defender, but we saw. I mean, he could have been up for grabs in the Gold Glove conversation. It's just that I think, according to their stupid, rules, is that you have to play a certain amount of games to be kind of, um, or I think innings instead of games, but you have to be in left field or at a position for a certain amount of time. And he kind of played on. I think he played like, what was it, 108 games? Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 108 games, and so he just barely missed that. So he could have been a Gold Glover, or at least a finalist in that position. Um, so yeah, he might even be able to win a Gold Glove this year. I would not be shocked if that happens. He'll definitely be up there for sure. Offensively, we already know what he can do, and basically just a little over 100 games, he was able to have a 2020 season. And I think a lot of people are saying that he's going to have a 30 season. I would love to see that. Again, I think we kind of briefly talked about this, how there's some players that we're kind of worried that might have a regression year. No Joe is one of those players for me, but still, I think he's going to have a great year. Even if he hits 26, 27 home runs, that's still going to be a solid season. And I forget, it's been a while because I know CJ Crone hit like I believe 27 or 28 home runs a couple times with us, but I want to say the last person to hit 30 plus home runs was Nolan Arenado in 2019, was it? I think.
I believe it was also Nolan and Trevor Story. They both
Yeah, right. And so no, Joe, I think Nolan is probably going to be the next guy for the Rockies to do that, unless if Ryan McMahon just all of a sudden out of nowhere gets hot and finally gets that 30 plus home run season, and then so Nolan, he's going to be left fielder at least for me, and then center fielder Bretton Doyle, he's locked in there, he's not moving. We know what he can do with the glove. Excuse me. And then offensively, the bat needs to come around. But, we saw at the end of the season that he kind of changed his stance a little bit. He was able to move that around, change up his swing a little bit, just a little bit, not much. But we saw at the end of the season that his numbers improved. And so I think a lot of eyes are on Britton Doyle to have somewhat of a big year offensively. And, the guy has power. We saw that when he came up. And he got hot when he came up, and then he obviously got cold, started striking out. So that we need that to come down. And then so Doyle's in center field, Nolan Jones is in left field, and then right field. This one's interesting because we talked about this before. Charlie Blackmon, he might be playing right field, but I think primarily he's going to be DH this year. So I think maybe Hunter Goodman is in there for right field because I know in our projected lineup we put Goodman in right field, but there's still a question mark with some of the other guys that the Rockies have. Will Toglia be up here? And we talked about infielders last week, how we kind of think that Toglia will be in AAA. So Goodman could definitely be in right field for the Rockies. Sean Bouchard is definitely a possibility because a year ago, like I was talking to Tom right before we started tonight, a year ago, Sean Bouchard was going to be the starting left fielder. And then when he got hurt, the Rockies had to sign Jurickson Profar, and that wasn't necessarily the greatest signing in the world. But but yeah, I think Bouchard could be definitely a possibility in right field. I think he's a lot of fans like him. I like him too. I actually did a podcast about him. I think a couple years ago. I think it was like in November of 2022. And again, end of the season really, really well, really hot. We already know that last week where he hit like I think 4 or 5 home runs in that final homestand. So that was really cool to see. I think Bouchard definitely is a possibility. Bryant, I think occasionally will play in right field, but I think like we talked about last week, Bryant is going to be your first baseman. So I guess for right field, I mean, Yanquiel Fernandez, I don't think he'll reach the big leagues this year. I just feel like with his track record, he'll probably start the year in Double A Hartford and then end the season in Albuquerque if he can, contribute well in Hartford, which is probably the hardest level in the minor league system, and kind of need those strikeout numbers to come down. So I'm just curious to see what you think will be the right fielder because for me, it's kind of between two guys with Hunter Goodman and Sean Bouchard.
Yeah, when it comes down to me, I mean, obviously, I'll just go over real quick. Nolan Jones, looking at his Zips projections that are now available on Fangraphs, they're projecting him to have a 23. One side is going to have a 23 home run season, another 25 home run season, so that's pretty good. It is good to specifically see him getting that national recognition. He made, for the life of me, I cannot remember what his MLB Network top 100 ranking was, but he's on there. It's good to see them hear it. I know also there was a segment where it was Matt Vasgersian, and I believe it was Ron Darling talking about him. So they're giving him some recognition, which is good to see. People are talking about him. They understand what this guy's potential. I do believe also MLB put out a projections, their own personal projections of what they think he'll get, which is good. Again, it's good to see him getting the national recognition. He will be in left field. His Zips projections have him specifically at going for offensive and defensive WAR. They project him to have an offensive WAR of 13.6 and a negative 0.2 defensive WAR. So a little not exactly what you want to see. Someone who you project to be your starting outfield, you're one of your stars. But as like you said, he has a great arm, probably better than most your standard left fielder. So it's good to see that. Brenton Doyle, he is going to be the everyday center fielder. Oh, and real quick correction on Nolan Jones, it was 106 games, not 108 that he played last year. So just pointing that out for a correction. Brenton Doyle is projected to have by Zips a similar defensive WAR. This year he was 12.6. This coming year he's projected to have 12.2. It's a little, I know we obviously people are going to hate me for saying this, but he's projected to have Zips is projecting him to have a negative 16.5 offensive WAR for a total of 1.2 total WAR. Again, the one big thing that they're looking at is he's projected to have a striker rate of 32.5%. Not what you want to see. If he can get that below 30, that'd be a huge jump forward for him, considering this past season his strikeout rate was a 35% even. Mm-hmm. So if he can get below 30, that'd be a huge step in the right direction for him. But the big thing for him is he is a defensive specialist. That's what we're looking for him to provide for this year's Rockies team and also moving forward. He is a strong guy. He had 10 home runs last year. They're projecting him to have 15 this year. So if he can provide some power and consistently play Gold Glove caliber defense and get on base at, let's say, a rate of 310, I think that's a pretty successful season for him, considering he is mostly known for his defense. And I've gone back and forth with this, as you probably have. I know we posted previously as Hunter Goodman as a projected starting right fielder on opening day. But as we talked about, Steven and I talked about before this recording, I'm going back and forth with these two because Sean Burchard, looking at his minor league history, his walk rate is much higher than Hunter Goodman. Mm-hmm. I've been toying with this a lot. And I know I shouldn't be jumping around on it too much, but it's like you pointed out, he was supposed to be the starting left fielder last year on opening day until he got injured.
Yeah.
So I think, as of right now, I'm going to change my stance. It wouldn't surprise me if I would pick that Sean Burchard is the starting right fielder on opening day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, with his power, he has decent power, and Goodman has his power too. Right? We saw that in AAA last year, especially in that final, or at least before Goodman got called up, he was hitting bombs like every single night. I mean, they were like literally bombs. And go check out those videos, because I think they should still be up on the Isotopes Twitter page. You might have to scroll for a while, but yeah, Goodman. I mean. I'm curious to see what he does in spring training. That's going to be huge. Again, that's why a lot of these players are in camp. They want to get extra look at these guys. And I think one of the big things too is that sometimes we don't often mention is that some of these younger prospects, they need playing time, like consistent playing time, because if you're not on the opening day roster, well, you're kind of wasting their talent away on the bench. And the Rockies, they've had their problems in doing that, where they've not played younger players, and they've just sat them on the bench. And Hunter Goodman does not deserve that. I think Hunter Goodman deserves to have, consistent playing time, right? And I think, he needs to be playing every single day. And I feel like he probably wouldn't be able to have that unless if he just out of nowhere just does extremely well in spring training. So I think Bouchard is probably going to be the right fielder, at least for me, in my opinion. So I'm just going to I'm probably going to go with Bouchard, because I feel like Bouchard is that guy because of his, his age, his experience. And again, I think a lot of people really like him, and I feel like he's that guy in right field for me. I think with Goodman, still needs some playing time, consistent playing time. And I think with his age, he'll get into that spot eventually. But I think for Goodman, he'll probably, at least for me, start in AAA. But again, if he makes his way on the opening day roster, great. But he'll probably be a backup right fielder. But personally, for me, I'd rather have him getting consistent playing time in AAA.
It wouldn't surprise me if both start the first spring training game.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think one nice thing is that a lot of these teams, especially the Rockies, they don't play their starters, for the first week or so of spring training. So I think what we're going to be seeing in the next 5-6 days on their first game, you're going to see a lot of prospects, a lot of bench guys getting playing time, which is good, which is what you want. And then once you get to the final like few weeks of spring training, you kind of see, um, you know, a lot of the more of the veterans like Chris Bryant, Charlie Blackmon, um, and it's kind of funny because Charlie Blackmon is that type of guy that just shows up last minute. He's like, you know what, I'm just gonna get like 15 at bats here in spring training, and I don't need it because it's like the guy's already a proven hitter. He doesn't really need to have spring training at bats. Maybe just a few of them just to get ready, kind of get used to big league pitching. But really, I feel like. Spring training is a lot for is really for the prospects. And I'll just say this too. I'm really excited about the spring breakout games that are going to be coming up. I think that was a great idea by baseball. I think the Rockies will be playing against the Arizona Diamondbacks prospects. Or at least it'll be the Rockies prospects versus the D-backs prospects. I think that's going to be coming up in March. It will be for like an exhibition game, so I'm super pumped for that. I'm really curious to see what the Rockies do for their pitching. Who's going to be starting that game? On the mound. Chase Dollander could be a possibility, but he's not a invitee for spring training. But I still think because I remember I think last year I saw Jordan Beck in some spring training games. It was like at the the seventh, eighth inning, in some of those games, and I think players can still play even if you're not an invitee, but it's basically a minor league camp, and I think. We'll probably see Dollander in there, and I'm kind of and actually somebody just DM'd me today, and they were wondering, where's Chase Dollander? Why is he invited? And I think it's kind of, for me, a little bit head scratching for me because I think Dollander could move very quickly through the system. But at the same time, though, I think the Rockies want to be careful with Dollander because, again, you're talking about a potential ace for your team. You want him to stay healthy. You want him to kind of fix some of those issues that he had in his senior year or at least it was junior or senior year in Tennessee. So really hope that Dollander can kind of fix that. And if he does fix it, great. I'm curious to see how he does in the minor leagues and where he starts in the minor leagues because I think I wouldn't be shocked if he starts in Spokane or maybe in Hartford. I could see him getting a couple starts in Spokane, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm super excited to see some of these younger players play. But yeah, just going back to some of those guys like Goodman, Bouchard, they need playing time, and especially for Goodman because he deserves it a little bit more than Bouchard does. Because Bouchard, he's not that type of guy that's like, oh man, you're this guy needs playing time, right? I mean, Bouchard, he's gotten his playing time, but I feel like Goodman, you just can't with his talent. Goodman, I think, could definitely be a very good player for the Rockies. And one thing I did notice is that with some of the pictures that Thomas Harding and Patrick Lyons have come out over the last couple of days, is that I'm starting to see Goodman catch in pitches like during the sessions during the bullpens. So it makes me wonder maybe we'll see Hunter Goodman as a potential backup. I know it's most likely going to be Jacob Stallings, but maybe if there's an injury with Diaz or Stallings, maybe we'll see Hunter Goodman be somewhat of a backup catcher. I think even last year, Bud Black mentioned how I think Goodman was going to be like a possibility as a backup catcher down the road. So that's somewhat interesting for me. But yeah, a lot of these players for the Rockies that are kind of like, you know what, they need their playing time.
I think Goodman will just be an emergency catcher in the event that you have a late extra inning situation and for whatever reason Diaz and Stallings were both either removed or one of them was ejected. For that reason only. But it is good to see them prepared because the third catcher would take up a roster spot. But when you have one that has that background to do it, I think that definitely helps. Like we said, it wouldn't surprise me if Borchard and Goodman are at some point, one way or the other, both starting the first spring training game. And I know that Bud Black is going to have those conversations with Jones and Doyle to see, hey, how much time do you need to prep and get ready? At what point they'll plan this out because obviously you don't want them sitting for for a very long time. Everybody has their different schedules as far as how they prepare and ramp up and get into game mode as far as playing every day, that sort of thing. And pitchers, of course, completely separate, depending if they're really a starter. But they're going to have that discussion. And like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if Doyle's even in center field for the first spring training game. But I'm 99% sure that Goodman and Borchard are going to be there in some capacity, are going to be out there in some capacity. Like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how they set the playing time as far as at bats moving forward. Because it was shocked that Dollander was not invited, but again, when you look at other non-roster invitees. I'm. It's going to be interesting. I'm looking at who the other ones are. It is going to be interesting to see how much Jordan Beck, Zach Veen, how many games they play in. They're probably going to be, as you mentioned, that one game against the Diamondbacks for the breakout stars. They'll probably play. They'll start those games, but I'm not sure how. I'm trying to think in my head how many spring training starts those two would get. And we'll talk about Bradley Zimmer later because he's there as well. You
Mhm.
know, he's the long-time veteran. Remember seeing him all those years in Cleveland. He was always a burner on the base paths. So, but yeah, it's the DV how they prepare and get people adjusted to start this new season, especially considering that Doyle and Jones are going into their sophomore campaigns. There's going to be a lot of eyes from you know all around Major League Baseball on Nolan Jones, but all us Rockies fans are focused not just on him, but interested to see how Doyle progresses. It's going to be interesting to see what their what their prep um, calendar is for the season and this one specifically in general.
Yeah. Um,
Everybody's different, so
yeah, for
and
sure.
they're
Yeah.
professionals, but they're younger. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm very intrigued to see how this goes, and of course, where how many at bats. One last point to make: will Borchardt and Goodman bat more towards the top 2/3 of the lineup, or will they be in the bottom third for spring training? I'm interested to see. I really am intrigued to see how Bud Black deviates all this
Yeah.
stuff up.
I want to say there was a couple starts where Goodman like was in the top 4 or top 5 of the lineup, and I think Goodman's more
Okay.
of that guy. Bouchard's more of the middle toward the rear end.
Power.
Yeah, a lot of power, and so you kind of need both those guys. They have like I said, a bunch of power, and so um, but I guess there's another guy. Okay, so right before we started, we were kind of like talking about some outfield prospects that we're looking at. Yanquiel Fernandez, again,
Mhm.
he's going to be playing probably in the minor leagues all year, unless if something happens to where he just goes on fire. I mean, again, I saw somewhere on Twitter today that he was in batting practice at the facility down there in Arizona. That he was hitting. I think he hit a couple bombs, so that's good. That's exciting. We need to see some because I think there's been reports saying that there's some holes in his swing, like he has strikeout numbers, but the power's there. So I'm curious to see what he does. And then, Zach Veen. I think Zach Veen is somewhat of a guy that I think could definitely make his way to the big league roster at some point this year. But if that happens, I told Tom earlier, I think it's going to be more toward August, September at the end of the season, final few weeks of the year. If not, then 2025 is going to be his year to where he's going to be the starting right fielder for the Rockies. I really don't necessarily like him playing in center field. Obviously, I think
Mhm.
Doyle is going to be that guy in center field. I think
Right.
with Jones in left field, it's going to be Zach Veen in right field. So the Rockies, they're going to have to make some choices to whether, okay, are we going to make trades? Are we going to move some guys around? Um, Zach Veen, again, I think Zach Veen could be a possibility, but again, I think like Fernandez, both those guys are kind of in the same spot, kind of because really Zach Veen lost some time, especially with him being injured. So him and Fernandez are kind of like on the same train tracks to the big leagues in terms of like ETA and when they're going to be coming up here. And then I guess we'll jump right into Bradley Zimmer, who the Rockies they signed to a minor league deal just a week or two ago. And I'm not. I'm not, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that deal, but it gives the Rockies a decent glove in the outfield because I've seen some highlights of what he's been able to do with the glove. He's actually really, really good defensively. He has a pretty good defensive numbers. I hear he has a pretty decent arm, but he can't hit. And he's very much he's kind of similar to Britton Doyle in some of his numbers. And last year, even with the Dodgers AAA team in Oklahoma City, he did not hit well at all. And so Zimmer, I think Zimmer is going to be interesting to see. In some ways, I don't see him being on the roster just because I don't know if he's going to be there offensively. And I think the Rockies could definitely use his bat, but he doesn't have one. And so the Rockies, they need a guy that, if Brenton Doyle has the day off, somebody can kind of be there to kind of back him up. But the bat is just, again, like I said, it's not there. And so, I wouldn't necessarily, it's a bad signing by the Rockies. It's just something, a move I probably wouldn't make. I would have gone toward more of maybe of David Peralta or somebody like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it just he's there for depth. And again, I mean, he might not even reach the big leagues this year. I think he's probably going to spend most of the time in AAA, but who knows? Maybe he'll be on the opening day roster. But I think with the Rockies, with the move that have not made this offseason, because I know a lot of people really wanted the Rockies to go out in free agency and spend big, or at least spend some money on pitching and do that. The Rockies, they want to save some of their guys, especially younger players. They want to be loyal to the young players and give them their playing time, because I think the Rockies I think we can all agree that they finally have committed to the rebuild. They're committed to the young players, and they're going to give them, the playing time that they need. It's just that for some of the younger players, it's going to be some of the for Goodman. Goodman is going to be. I think that's going to be the toughest for him, because he, he can play right field, he can play first base, but those two positions are kind of already filled right now. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, that's I think those are the three guys that I guess will be my backups. I'm trying to think. Of course, Benny Montgomery, he's obviously an invitee for spring training. I think he'll probably start the year in Double A. Jordan Beck, who we talked about, a little bit before. Fangraphs has him, I think, starting in AAA. And I think he could definitely have a chance to make the big leagues this year. He has a very, very good good power, solid ball player. And then, and then Sterling Thompson, of course, he. And one nice thing is that we didn't mention him last week, but Sterling Thompson, he can play infield, he can play outfield. So, and I think he's played a little bit of left field and even right field. So Sterling Thompson, he's been a consistently good hitter throughout the minor leagues. So I think that's another guy to keep an eye on. But really, for me, I guess the starters and the bench guys, or guys to keep your eye out for to potentially make the roster, would be, okay, so left fielder Nolan Jones, Doyle in center, Sean Bouchard in right field, and then potential backups or bench players in the outfield will be Hunter Goodman, maybe Michael Toglia, and then Bradley Zimmer. So those are my outfield guys.
Yeah, just looking at Bradley Zimmer's past. Yeah, he's never had an OPS plus over 100, and he's never OPS plus over 100 and OPS over 692. So he was not brought in for offensive purposes. He is strictly a defensive player, considering he has a good history of defensive WAR, well above 0. This past season in 2022, his last marked season on Fangraphs, he had a defensive WAR of 3, but a offensive WAR of 8.3. So it's safe to say, if he's added to the 40-man roster, assuming he makes the team out of spring training and gets added to the 40-man roster, he'll be a completely serviceable depth piece, like how I put this, fifth, sixth outfielder, however you want to spin it. Yeah, it's like you and I have talked about off through text and everything. I specifically am very interested to see how Zach Veem, if he plays the full season again. He had the injury last year that he had surgery on. I am very intrigued if he plays a full season, what kind of damages he does, because we all know he's got the potential. I love the fact, of course, that he, based on all the non-roster invitees that the Rockies have a future for, he is the only left-handed outfield bat. Again, Zimmer being the other, but he's not part of the future. Beck, Montgomery, they're both right-handers. And, looking at the makeup of our going to be projected outfield setup, Jones is the only lefty. So, again, and people are wondering why I'm making that kind of a fuss over left-handed hitters. Well, there's a lot more right-handed pitchers in the game of baseball than there are lefties. So, and Jones is good against lefties and righties. But I'm not saying Veem can't be, but the fact is we need to make sure that for the next Rockies contender, we want to have as diverse of a lineup as possible. And for that, we're going to need as many left-handed hitters, not just, of course, in their everyday lineup, but also on the bench as well. Because, again, if you go back to the infield, the projected starting for Bryant, righty, Rogers, right-handed, Tovar, right-handed, McMahon, the only lefty in the projected starting infield. So combining the two, that's 2 left-handers. And of course, behind the plate, you've got Diaz as a righty. So that's why that's a big thing is, like I said, you want to diversify your lineup and your bench. Veem is the one I'm really keeping my eye on. Again, as you point out, Jordan Beck definitely has the possibility to make some noise here. And we got to, of course, can't forget Benny Montgomery. But me personally, I'm really intrigued to see how Zach Bean does, because it's unfortunate that he was on one of the top 100 lists last year. It was either as 99 or number 100 ranked prospect, but he fell off of the newest list, probably because of due to the injury. So I'm looking to see what kind of production he puts forth, given we know he's motivated. He wants to get to the big leagues. The Rockies have faith in him. So that's who I'm keeping my eye on more specifically going forward. But of course, as you pointed out, Sterling Thompson can play the outfield. He's somebody also like I mentioned, I think in our last week's podcast, we should keep an eye on. But yeah, Veen is most notably who I'm going to keep my eye on as far as his progression. But I believe he'll probably start in Hartford if I had to guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at like I think this website is called prospects1500.com. I'm just like looking at some of the outfield prospects that the Rockies have. Cole Carrig, who we drafted last year, I think he can move up through the system pretty quickly, but they have him. Actually, he can play outfield, shortstop, and catching. Like he can play everywhere, and so he could be an outfielder. But I want to say again, I thought I saw somewhere. I think it might have been his personal Instagram story. He was catching, and so I think he was drafted as a catcher. That's again, we talked about catchers last week, but again, he could play outfield eventually. And again, this is probably going to be another few years away, but Cole Carrick could be definitely a guy that moves up pretty quickly. And I think he's probably going to be starting in Spokane this year. And then I think right before we started, what was his name? Vladimir Restituyo.
Yes.
He's an outfielder. And again, we were kind of, talking before we started is that, he kind of needs to, get some muscle on him because he's 5'10", 100, like, what was it, 50 pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
That guy, I think he did pretty well in winter ball. I know he played winter ball this winter, but, if he can, get some muscle on him and kind of, grow into, a ball player, like, I think Restituyo could be an interesting guy. So again, there's a bunch of these guys that are coming up, in Fresno and Spokane and even in Hartford that are kind of like, oh, keep an eye on these guys. And one guys I know that Blake Street Banner, they talked about him, is Jimmy Herron, who is, I think he is in AAA right now, or at least he spent last year in AAA. He could be another option, but again, the age. I'm not saying he's too old, but I just feel like the Rockies, they need to focus more on their topper. That's a good new word for tonight. Their top prospects. And Jimmy Herron, though, keep an eye on him. I mean, the guy, he has had good success in AAA before with the Isotopes. So it's just like, again, we're gonna have to keep an eye on a bunch of these guys. And with the outfield, it's very, very, like, left field and center field, you're all like, it's all set with Nolan Jones and Doyle. But with right field, it's kind of like, big question mark as we get ready to start, spring training next week with the games and everything. But yeah, it's just like, okay, who's going to be a right field? Because originally I was like, okay, maybe it could be Goodman. But now as I think about it, I just feel like Sean Bouchard might be, again, that right field guy, because again, last year got hurt, was on the IL the entire season. And I just feel like they might give him the opportunity to play right field because, again, I mean, he was playing every day at the end of the season. It's not like the Rockies were like, oh, you know what, the season's over, you might as well just sit on the bench. No, he was getting, starting basically every single game. So I think, at least for right now, before spring training starts, I think, not Goodman, Bouchard is going to be your starting right fielder, and then Goodman maybe. Again, I think if something happens, if there's an injury, Goodman will be there up in the big leagues regardless whether if there's room for Goodman or not. I think Goodman will definitely be able to be there in right field for the Rockies should something happen to Bouchard or heaven forbid that Nolan Jones or Doyle goes down. So. The Rockies have options, but it's not like, oh, okay, this is a solid guy. Like, I think the next guy that's really, I guess, guaranteed to be their everyday right fielder, I feel like for me is going to be Zach Veen, and he's it's kind of like where he's going to start. I wouldn't be surprised he starts in Double-A, just be for a few weeks, maybe a little bit more, just kind of test him out. Be careful because you don't want to immediately send him to Triple-A. You want to have him get some playing time, kind of finish up in Double A, and kind of see, hey, is he ready to advance to Triple A, where he can actually face guys that have actually played in the big leagues, or at least some guys. So that's gonna be a test for him. So yeah, I mean, spring training, that's all what's all about. So make sure to stay tuned, because I guess we can quickly mention this, because I think last week they didn't have the announcement on it yet, but the Rockies, they now have a TV deal. So you'll be able to watch the Rockies on, I believe, MLB TV, but they're calling it Rockies TV. Um, I know, I think Tom texted me over the week, and you got it. You got the package, right? Is it the $99 package, or is it the full package?
I haven't gotten it yet. I'm going to sign up for it once right before the season starts. But
Okay.
you can do, of course, all teams if you want to get access to, and there's no, if my understanding, no blackouts.
Yeah.
Or you can do an individual team. I'm just going to do the individual team because
Mm-hmm.
for me, the White Sox, I've already got NBC Sports Chicago through my YouTube TV subscription, so I'm just going to get the Rockies through MLB, or sorry, Rockies TV is how it's going to be.
Yeah. Good deal. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to sign for that. And if you give me a minute, I can double check what the pricing is for anybody
Yeah.
out there. But
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and say that I think I told Tom too over text, is that I think, because again, I think Blake Street Banner, shout out to those guys, check them out. They mentioned on their podcast this week that I think in one of those I want to say it's the Rockies package, but if you get the Rockies package, which again I think it's $100, you get
Uh,
the minor league affiliates, I think.
Yeah, so MLB DB all teams is $149.99 per year a year, and MLB.TV single team is $129.99 a year.
Okay.
And to your question about the affiliates, let me read this.
I think it's the Rockies package one.
It is. Let me see. Just a con for everybody. No live in-market or nationally televised games are included. Only the local market ones.
Yeah.
So, and you only get access to the specific team, home and away. I'm trying to see if the Rockies TV.
But the good news is that the Rockies won't have to, you won't have to worry about blackouts. Like, that's gonna be lifted. So like
Yeah.
for me personally, like I find other ways to stream Rockies games, because I originally used to have AT&T Sportsnet, then a couple years ago got rid of it, and I found other ways to watch the Rockies games. But I think for me, if I was, if you guys watch Rockies baseball on TV or MLB Network or MLB TV, you'll be able to watch the Rockies now without having blackout restrictions. Because I remember there would be times where, like, especially last year, I was on vacation in Michigan and I couldn't watch the Rockies. The only way I could do it was through MLB TV. But and I think there would be times where, whenever the Rockies would be, the free game of the day, I was able to watch them. But if it was at here in Colorado where I live, I couldn't watch them because it was blacked out because of the stupid MLB TV rules. But now I think baseball is kind of working toward where they're kind of working on lifting those blackout restrictions, which is good. They still need to work on that. I think with some of the new TV deals that are coming into play now, and I think eventually Major League Baseball, they're all going to come into some sort of, I think one, big network, I guess, to kind of end blackouts. So that's somewhat of a positive thing.
Okay, and real quick, just a correction on what I said. That was for a general. I found another article, sorry, my apologies to everybody. Through MLB.TV and MLB app, Rockies fans in the Colorado area can subscribe to Rockies TV to watch their team during the regular season, both live and on demand, subject to national exclusivities, for $99.99 a year and $19.99 monthly with no blackouts.
Yay! No blackouts.
So there you go for that one. And
Mhm.
yeah, so I think to your point about with, of course, the Diamond Sports and Bally Sports bankruptcy, the landscape is changing. Regional sport networks are no longer are not the future in terms of Major League Baseball. I know, of course, again, we have to put up with the, how do I say this without being too mean? I call him the spineless leader of baseball. We only have to put up with him until 2029. I know that one of the things he wants to wrap up before he leaves his final term as MLB commissioner is he wants to take care of the whole TV setup deal, because I know that Amazon wanted to buy all the rights to all these bankrupt networks and everything, but MLB said, hold on, no, we don't want you doing that, because MLB wanted to secure all that and then sell it to Amazon for even more money. So there's going to be changes in the landscape right now. It's good to see that Major League Baseball is trying to get out ahead of it with this here. But the only question, as far as, because there are still some teams with their own network, such as the Yankees with the Yes Network. I can't remember the name of the Mets network. Cubs have the Marquee Network, and
Mhm.
the White Sox, they're part of NBC Sports Chicago. The list goes on. It's going to be very interesting to see how this whole, because again, we do have who is it? Apple TV with the Friday night games. Peacock through NBC has the Sunday day games. And of course, MLB, ESPN, and Fox still do the national broadcast games. It's going to be very interesting to see how this whole regular season game broadcast landscape changes as far as who's going to get the rights.
Mhm.
We'll see, but yeah,
Yeah.
for update, that's what everybody has. And specifically, I know we'll talk about this area. It's sad to see Jenny Kavanaugh depart. So
Yeah, I thought that was really cool, and for her to become
yeah.
the first, woman to be play-by-play official
Mhm.
play-by-play of a number one for a team. That's really cool, and
Mhm.
kind of feel bad for her going to a team like the A's that they're probably going to have a bad season, but still, it's kind of cool to see that she's going to be able to have that opportunity to
Mhm.
to do games with the Athletics. Um, what was I going to say? I think.
Well, if they once they get she's going to be moving a lot because they don't know where they're going to be playing next year.
Yeah, it's hey, it's something that because again they kind of came up this week about how he's like, okay, by the end of my tenure as the commissioner, I want to make sure that it's like finalized that they're going to be in Oakland. Well, again, I watched Foul Territory, great podcast on YouTube with AJ
Mhm.
Brzezinski and Eric Kratz and Scott Braun, but they were talking about how a lot of the guys, a lot of the guests on their show, they're not really confident that the A's are going to be in Vegas. And I agree. I don't think this is just my opinion. I think me and
Go
Tom talked about it yesterday.
ahead.
I think there's a good chance that they stay in Oakland
Mm.
because they're going to eventually, they're basically going to have to, the ownership, they're going to be stuck against the wall making a decision. Either you stay or either we're going to get an expansion team here. And so I think Fisher is probably, I mean, he's already pressured to sell the team. And the question is, will he sell the team? I don't know. We'll see, but probably not. I mean, that guy needs to go. He's the worst guy in the history of sports owners. But we'll see. But I think the chances of the A staying in Oakland are still there. But it just next few years it's going to be a disaster for the organization. But you know what? Hey, at least they got good prospects coming up. So that you got that to hang your hat on, A's fans. We feel sorry for you, but you know what? Yeah, maybe John Fisher will go eventually, but I guess we'll see. One thing I did want to talk about the Rockies TV very quickly before we end tonight is I th- I thought I heard somewhere that you might be able to have like a somewhat of a pregame show. I know the
Mhm.
D-backs last year they had like a 5-minute pregame show. I want to say with this new thing, again I might be wrong. I want to say like you'll be able to have like kind of like what you had with AT&T Sportsnet with the club. You can have your own shows, but I might be wrong. Do you have any details on that?
I'm looking right now. While we were talking, set the lunch stream. The only thing it says is there the details of their streaming service. Hold on. Excuse me, I'm going
Mhm.
over a little cough here.
Are you good?
I just found an article that elaborates a little more. Let's see. It does say, all right, online streaming service for 2024 season. Oh, okay. Here's some of those. The streaming service is $19.99 monthly, $100 for the season. Games on Rockies TV will include live 15-minute pre and post game shows. So there you
Okay,
go.
yeah,
Quote
because
and
I
quote,
think
quote,
last year, yeah,
yeah, quote end quote.
yeah, because I think last year, like the D-backs and Padres, who were kind of in the same situation we are right now, they had like 5-minute pregame and postgame shows. Where now, 15 minutes. That's pretty good. That's kind of like what the Rockies had with the previous TV deal with the AT&T Sports. Now, however, I think the club. I know a lot of Rockies fans who are watching and listening. They love that. I like that show. It's kind of sad
Mhm.
that in some capacity it won't be there, but the good news is that they're going to have some type of show before and after the games, and most of the crew will be coming back minus Jenny Kavnar. So that's good stuff. Lux in the comments here from YouTube says a really good comment. He said, "I didn't know it was possible to be worse than the Rockies owner."
Oh,
Right?
Lux,
Right?
trust me, it is trust me. There are worse owners,
Yeah.
not just in baseball, but outside of baseball. Trust me, there was. I would throw
Yeah.
not just John Fisher. I would throw Mark Davis into that category as being worse than Dick
Yeah.
Mumford. possibly even my White Sox, Jerry Reinsdorf. I throw him below Dick Monfort on some standards.
Mhm.
Trust me, there are worse ones. Believe me when I say it.
Yeah. And I think what was it a week ago? Because we both follow Drew Creasman. He covers the
Mhm.
Rockies
Yeah.
at Mile High Sports. He had people literally coming up to him and saying, "Yeah, we're worse than the Oakland Athletics. We have a worse owner." I'm like, "Are you serious?" Like, I'm like, "Are you kidding?" Like, okay, so
Oh
I
God.
know we Rockies fans, we've suffered for a while, but imagine Dick Monfort trading all your star players, which Dick Monfort has not done.
Mhm.
Yes, we know Arenado's gone, but thanks, Ethan, for the comment. We'll answer it here in just a second. But, you know, Dick Monfort, he's willing to spend money. And I know sometimes it hasn't been in the greatest places, right? But at least he's kind of, and he's tried. I mean, even some people have said that he's tried different things with the Rockies. And sometimes, again, they haven't worked, but at least he's trying to. And I know again, we talked about this before. Dick Monfort's not the greatest owner, but he's definitely not the worst owner in baseball, in my opinion, because if he was, we'd be we wouldn't have a baseball team. We'd be on our way out. But Dick Monfort has stated that he wants to keep the Rockies no matter what happens, whether he sells the
Mhm.
team or keeps the team. He wants the Rockies to be here forever. And I think
Mhm.
that's the great thing. Where John Fisher, he's literally destroying that fan base, basically putting up the middle finger to everybody in baseball, including their own fans, and basically saying "F you," right? And so I think for Rockies fans, we're I guess the word I'm going to use is blessed. I mean, even though we don't like Dick Monfort, I'm not a big fan of him, but I still think he's a much better owner than a lot of some of these other owners in
Mhm.
sports, especially in baseball. Um, but I tend to look at more of the positives, not at Dick Monfort, but more of the positive in the front office. The Rockies, they have an improving farm system. I mean, a farm system, but also a front office. And some people, like again, a lot of these people at Talking Baseball and John Boy Media, which I liked some of their videos, but they were talking the other day how the Rockies front office is terrible, one of the worst in baseball. Well, I believe they haven't really watched the Rockies over the last couple of years because the Rockies, they've revamped their front office. Again, just a couple weeks ago, they hired somebody from the Twins organization to be their scout, a longtime scout. And so the Rockies, they're bringing people in from other organizations. And yeah, I think they could definitely use some more people to come in from other organizations. It's just that I feel like people, me and my brother, we talk about this all the time. Yeah, the Rockies deserve some criticism, but I feel like like a lot of people, especially Rockies fans, just talk crap about the Rockies just to talk crap because you get views, you get followers from that, and you get likes from that. And see, I don't like, I like the Rockies because they're my favorite team. Yeah, sometimes I'm pissed at them, but I follow the team. Why? Because I love the Rockies and I want them to become
Mhm.
a good team. And blaming Dick Monfort is not going to do much for you, or boycotting the team is not going to do much for you. Look at what's happened over the last couple of years. A lot of people are boycotting the team, and guess what? People are still showing up. Why? Because they love the Rockies. Now, occasionally you'll have those casual fans that go to Coors Field to have a beer or whatever, but I really, really, I agree with you, Tom, that Dick Monfort's not even close to being the worst owner in baseball.
Yeah, if you want, I mean, I can go into detail this. I don't want to take up too much time in this episode, but
Mhm.
if people watch press conferences compare between John Fisher and Dick Monfort at least has answers to business questions as far
Yeah,
as how to run the team and such. John Fisher, zero clue. I mean, look, I
nobody likes
mean,
the guy.
yeah, I mean, if anyone looks at the recent introduction where he walked on stage to people of the National Assembly in Vegas, he got no applause. Even the lady who was the main master of ceremony, she says, "Come on, guys, give him a little bit," and nothing. That tells you what that should.
Yeah,
I am 99.9% certain the A's are staying in Oakland.
yeah,
It's on record right now. Again, trust me, people. If people think, oh, they're going to Vegas, that's just no. The only thing that's been approved is the owner saying, "Okay, cool, go ahead. You guys." What that vote was to approve them to explore opportunities of relocation. That does not mean
yeah,
they're gonna be now the Vegas A's. The only time, first of all, the next step to where we should think, oh, they're going to Vegas is when financing is secured to build the ballpark. And number two, where the ballpark is set to be, where the Tropicana is getting torn down, that was already approved to be torn down a couple of years ago
yeah,
before this relocation change. So trust, again, don't want to spend too much time on this. I mean, honestly, when people look at John Fisher, the guy's a nepo baby. He got his fortune inherited from his parents because they
Yeah.
built Gap, which built Banana Republic. Whereas Dick Mumford is actually a smart businessman. He negotiated to build around Coors Field. He put the
Mhm.
stadium in a good situation. The guy actually knows how to run businesses, whereas John Fisher, he's
No,
a
no,
nepo,
no clue. Yeah.
he's a nepo baby.
Yeah. Well, if
Uh,
if people have seen, again, we want to end this quickly, and
Sure,
thank you
go
for
ahead,
your
sorry.
comments. Um, but if you've seen like the documentary of how the Rockies began, and actually there's a documentary, if you've seen it, came out
Mhm,
last summer about the fans starting the Rockies organization. Really, they wanted a team here in Denver, and you look at the history of Denver, the area where the ballpark is right now at Coors Field was actually more of a dumpy part of town. It was very
mhm,
dumpy. It
correct.
was kind of like a Wild West type of street. Like Blake Street was like basically you'd see tumbleweeds going through the streets. I mean, there was like broken glass bottles from drunks. It was kind of a messy part of town. But if you go down to Coors Field, which I've been to, at least 7, 8 times, and I went there this past August to a Rockies game. It's one of the most cleanest parts of Denver I've ever been to, and the way that they've actually built around the stadium, it has been pretty impressive. So we can be thankful that we have one of the best ballparks in
Mhm.
baseball. At least we can kind of cheer about that. But the
And yeah.
Rockies, they have a wonderful fan base, and fans that actually care. So
And
again,
one more comment I can make is at least the Rockies are being progressive about towards their future, whereas right
yeah,
now, the Oakland A's, you got Brent Rooker and you got one top 100 prospect. They're kind of at a standstill because,
hmm
it's tough. I give the GM, I know he wants to do a good job. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he wants to do a good job. But with the uncertainty of where they're going to be, it's tough for him to build a team.
yeah, and I
It's tough to lure free agents. It's tough to develop
yeah,
your prospects. It's tough to develop a living situation for
mhm,
anybody. It's a challenge. And with us, we at least look at Dick Monfort real quick. At least he understood it was time when it was time to move on from his current leadership. He knows when is a good time to stay the course and when it's time to move on. Such as,
mhm,
sorry, he spent money on Nolan Arenado, but Nolan he wanted out, and I can't
yeah,
blame him considering who was running the team and Jeff Bridich. I can't. I don't blame Nolan. I really
yeah,
don't.
yeah.
So he knew, but then again, once I was over, Dick Monfort said, "Okay, time to
You're
move
out.
on."
Yep.
Bill Schmidt has a plan, and he's at least he's being progressive. Because real quick, last thing, that longtime scout from the Twins, great outside hire. So again, they're being progressive, and there is reasons to be optimistic.
Not to mention, we have one of the best international, directors in baseball. Who actually, I think he won international director in baseball this year.
Mhm, he did.
I think Rolando Fernandez, and so great person. And the Rockies, they've had a bunch of good prospects coming out through the system, and the head of that is Bill Schmidt, not Dick Monfort. Bill Schmidt is in charge of the farm
Mhm,
system. He's in
mhm,
charge of really the entire front office situation. Dick Monfort occasionally will have his talks in that, but one thing that I've heard from a source, is that Dick Monfort in the last couple of years he has stepped away from making some of the bigger decisions. Dick Monfort
mhm,
has kind of
yeah,
stepped away. He's more of the business side of things, where
mhm,
Bill Schmidt, he's more focused on the player development, which we've seen has taken a big step, especially in the last couple of years. Because again, Jeff Bridich wasn't the greatest at that. Thank you, Ethan, for your comment. Thank you for waiting. How are the Rockies looking during the spring training? So again, we haven't really seen any game action, but there's, I think, just 2 days ago we had the first pitchers and catchers report, and then I think on the 20th, which is going to be, is that Monday or Tuesday?
I believe. One second. It says the 17th. That's Tuesday, I believe.
Tuesday, yeah. So that will be, I believe, the first day. It will be either the Monday or Tuesday. It will be
Yeah,
the
it's Tuesday. Yeah, correct.
okay. So that will be for the first team workout, I think, and then the first game is on Friday against Arizona
Mhm.
Diamondbacks. Um,
Defending champs, the NL National League champs. Excuse me. I want to make sure that's
mhm.
clear. People, I know the Rangers were the champions.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and then, of course, we're gonna do a podcast on, projections, and we're gonna talk about the, Rangers and D-backs because I feel like both of those teams might have a kind of a step back here. We'll see. Um,
Mm. They're
I mean,
not. They're def. They're, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna think, what's your thoughts on those 2 teams before we end the night?
I wouldn't say maybe a step back. They're still not the favorites in their division. I would say that's the one thing I
Yeah,
would
well,
say.
like the Dodgers, man. I mean, looking at
Oh
some of the videos
God.
from Yamamoto, like his slider is so good. Like
Yeah.
I'm scared, legitimately
Uh,
scared to face
I'm more
much of this.
I'm more impressed with his motion as far as how he delivers the ball. He has kind of an interesting release. That's
Yeah,
and again, a lot of Japanese players are very unique as far as their releases when it comes to pitchers.
yeah.
I got to get a closer look to look more, but I like it's kind of funny where and how far down he releases the ball.
Mhm,
But it's gonna be interesting. But again, just a quick comment as you point out, the Rangers and Diamondbacks, I still believe are going to be formidable and make the playoffs again. But as far as they're not the favorites in their division, still, I'd still put
mhm.
Astros, Dodgers are still as the top dogs in that division still.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I think as we wrap up, just for like some dates to keep in mind, the Rockies again, their first game is on Friday against the Arizona Diamondbacks. So
Mhm.
next time we talk to you guys, we'll already have our first game done. And actually, I think next week, well, again, next week we're going to have our pitchers podcast. But I think at the end we're going to kind of talk about the game that happened on Friday and even Saturday, because I think Saturday there's like two games. I think it's a split
Uh,
squad. So
mhm.
we'll talk briefly about that, and then after that we're going to kind of start kicking into again, we're gonna have kind of like regular podcasts like we do now, but then once we get in the season, we'll kind of give you more details of what we're gonna do. Like we're gonna do our, basically our Rockies game reviews, where it's gonna be like I believe like 3 to 5 minute like short videos where we kind of run down like some of the highlights from the game. So spring training we won't be doing that necessarily, but maybe at the end of each podcast we'll kind of talk about what happened in that game for that week and so on and so forth. So I think that'll do it for tonight's podcast. Thank you so much for listening to today's edition of the podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, follow, rate, and review all of our social media pages. We love hearing from all of our wonderful listeners. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the podcast. Have a great day, everyone. And as always, go Rockies.